This is my last video on naming. This one has both ionic and covalent compounds in it. So the first thing I'm going to do before I name anything is figure out if it's ionic or covalent. So Xe is a nonmetal, F is a nonmetal. So that means this is covalent, and I use the covalent rules to name it. So Xe is xenon, F is fluoride, we're going to change the ending to IDE, and then we look up the prefixes. For Xe, the subscript is 1, which means it's mono, which we don't write for the first word. For F, it is 6, which is hexa. So xenon hexafluoride. The next one is a name. We're going to write the formula, but first we need to figure out if it's ionic or covalent. Sodium is a metal. Phosphate is a polyatomic ion, so this must be ionic. Sodium gets a +1 charge. Phosphate is on our polyatomic chart. It's PO4 3-. We crisscross. And we get Na3PO4. And if you want to have parentheses around phosphate, you can, but it's not mandatory. Next one, copper 2 sulfate. Copper is a metal. Sulfate is a polyatomic ion, so this one is going to be ionic. Because of this Roman numeral, we know copper, which is a transition metal, gets a 2+ charge. Sulfate is on our polyatomic chart, and it gets a 2- charge. We crisscross, and we get Cu2, SO4, 2. Now, because this 2 is on the outside of the parentheses, it can be simplified with this one. We cannot simplify anything inside the parentheses, anything that's part of the polyatomic. But because the 2 is on the outside, we can get rid of it. And our final answer would be CuSO4. If you wanted to keep that parentheses around SO4, you could. Our next one, sulfur dioxide. Now, if you notice the prefix di, you automatically know this is covalent, but if you don't, just take a look at the elements. Sulfur is a nonmetal. Oxygen or oxide is a nonmetal, so that means this one is covalent. So we write the symbol for the first element, the symbol for the second element. We then use the prefixes to get the subscripts. Sulfur doesn't have a prefix, so that means its subscript is a 1, which we don't write. Oxygen has a prefix of di, so it's going to be a 2. Remember, you do not crisscross for covalent compounds. Here we have CRP. Cr is a metal. P is a nonmetal, so this is ionic. We have chromium, phosphide. But because chromium is a transition metal, we need to figure out what the Roman numeral is. So we take our formula and we split it up. We then uncrisscross, and we get 1 plus and 1 minus. The last step here is to make sure that your negative ion has the right charge. So we look up phosphorus on the periodic table. Phosphorus is right here, and it has a 3 minus charge. On our paper, it has a 1 minus charge. So that means we need to multiply this by 3. So we end up with Cr3 plus P3 minus. Now that your negative ion has the correct charge, that 3 becomes the Roman numeral. The charge on the metal always becomes the Roman numeral. Okay, our next one is name to formula. If you notice the prefixes, you'll know it's covalent, but if not, look at the elements. We have nitrogen, which is a nonmetal, and oxygen, which is a nonmetal. So we write our symbol for nitrogen, our symbol for oxygen, and then look up the prefixes. Di is 2, mono is 1, which we don't write. So this will be N2O. Last one. Strontium, Sr is a metal. Bromine, Br is a nonmetal, so this is ionic. Strontium is not a transition metal, and Br is not a polyatomic. So this is what I call simple, because you just write the name of the first element and then the name of the second element with IDE.